Hey everyone, it's Peter Kerr from Rock Daydream Nation, and today I've got my guest from Scotland, Davey Gallagher. How are you, my mate?
Very well, thank you. How are you, Peter?
Not too bad, not too bad. We are going to cover another classic UK band formed in the late 80s, very big in the 90s, part of the Britpop movement, and we're talking about Suede. We're going to cover their third album, Suede, coming up. We'll talk about our first impressions of the album in the day, and then we'll do a song by song analysis. And at the end of the show, as usual, just give our summation of if it's a thumbs up or a thumbs down and where we rank them in the Suede discography. So, Davey, over to you. What was your first impression of this album in the day?
This was my first Suede album as a fan. I loved Britpop, loved it, but Suede's were being pushed at the time as this past it band because Bernard Butler had left after Dogman Star, the big fallout with Brett Anderson looking over me, and Dogman Star was decidedly not a Britpop album. It's everything but a Britpop album. And Brett was at pains to distance himself and Suede from Britpop in general. Doesn't like the scene, doesn't like the culture, doesn't like everything that goes with it. So they intentionally made something that was against the grain in 1993 with Dogman Star. They lose their iconic guitar player and co-songwriter, lest we forget. And they're pretty much written off because all of a sudden Blur have shot up and Oasis have come out of nowhere. Absolutely nowhere, and the new biggest brand in Britain is the enemy. Dubbed Suede are now past it and has-beens, and Bernard Butler, whatever he does next, is going to be the next big thing. And it kind of was for a minute with McCallum and Butler. They had a smash hit single with Yes, which charted higher than any Suede song at the time. But then this came out of absolutely nowhere, and a bit like the first Suede album, it started to build up popularity. It started to build steam via the singles, rather than just drop one single then the album. It started to kind of pick up pace gradually, like Suede have always done. Like 1992, they dropped a single. They had 3 singles out before the album, so people knew the songs first. And this is I didn't have the original CD at the time. I got that in 1998. But in 1997, I didn't get it quite at the time. In 1997, here's my cassette copy. And this has been on holiday with me. This literal cassette has been to the top of the Eiffel Tower and Notre Dame Cathedral. This exact copy, nice. Which some of the content on that in Notre Dame Cathedral makes me quite happy to think about, to be honest. So it was one of the tapes I took with me on a school trip, and that probably gives you a little bit of a heads up as to where I'm going to come down on this album, really. It was there for me at the very start. It got me hooked on the band. As we know, things would be a bit different going forward for them. Yep. But yeah, what a jumping on point for anybody. I mean, this is the perfect. If you have to jump in with Suede, this is where to jump in with Suede, I think.
Absolutely. I mean, there's a lot of wonderful jump-in points for Suede, but if you have to pick an album, I mean, 5 singles.
Yes.
It's wall-to-wall hits. And I think people forget how phenomenally successful this album was. It was actually like a mini comeback of sorts.
Mm-hmm.
So, I guess my first encounter with Suede was this album, which was The Debut. It only sort of charted in the top 20 in Australia, but through our alternative radio stations and the non-commercial radio stations, it certainly had a lot of airplay, and there was a bit of a buzz about it being the big new thing. I was aware of Dog Star Man being a difficult album, and it sort of tapered off. And I think the song that really got me back in and listening and purchasing this album was The Beautiful Ones, or Beautiful Ones, which we will cover when we go song by song analysis, which was a piece of glamtastic Bowie confectionery. It was just so infectious, and it was right in the middle of Britpop. There were all these nightclubs having Britpop dance nights, and when that song came on, it was an absolute everyone just filled into the dance floor. They loved it. So, so there was a bit of a buzz about this album, and we finally got to see Suede in 1999 with Head Music, finally. The once and only time they toured Australia, and they didn't disappoint. Brett Anderson was very much the rock star, as you would imagine, and fantastic live. All right, well, what we might do is we'll just go song by song through this album. So starting off with the opening track, which is a corker of a song, Trash. Now, this was a single, UK number 3, and it actually topped the charts in Finland. Just a little bit of trivia. So,
their first number 1, their first international number 1. So,
yeah. What do you think of this song?
Well, here's CD 1 of the single, and here's CD 2 of the single.
Yep.
There'll be a lot of this, because Suede are the band for B-sides. There's no better band for B-sides. People can talk about the great B-sides of the Smiths or Oasis. Suede's Sci-Fi Lullabies is one of the greatest compilation albums ever of all the B-sides. So this was the first Suede that I purchased, the single of Trash. It features exclusive new tracks. You don't get much more 90s than adding just exclusive rather than EX, just exclusive new tracks. Part 1 of the 2 CD set. Trash is... In the Classic Albums documentary, Ed Buller, the producer, says at the end of it, when they come back round to talk about Trash, it's the last digit in the phone number that you need, otherwise the whole album doesn't quite work. Just like the phone wouldn't ring if you didn't get that last digit right. And this very much needed to be the single. It needed to be the opening statement, we're back, you're not going to miss Bernard Butler. We've got Richard Oakes here now. Yeah, we know he's a schoolboy, but don't look too closely. He's still got long hair and he might look a bit like Bernard in the right light. 17
years of age. Wow.
17, yes.
What a gig. What a gig to get. Lucky man.
And a member of the Suede fan club, indeed.
What a story.
It went for, and you think that would be a much more famous story, wouldn't you? Like the guy who was literally in the fan club and then on the third album writes their biggest hits, or co-writes. And then you also have the addition of Neil Codling for the first time here. Neil is the cousin of Simon, the drummer, and he is on keys, plays a little bit of rhythm guitar, but he gives a lot of texture to the album that you don't get on the earlier stuff, or you did get, but rather through orchestration rather than through anything else. But Trash itself is your first kind of mission statement song. It's a bit like the one that you just referenced that we'll come to halfway through the album. It's very much we know what we are. You wouldn't get this written by Damon. You wouldn't get it written by Noel. It was only Brett who was willing to say, yeah, we know what we are. We're scuzzy, we're rough around the edges, we're nothings, we're nobodies, we're from Nowhereville, but at least we're together. We've got a kind of subculture. I mean, it's all there in the lyrics. Maybe it's the clothes we wear, the tasteless bracelets and the dye in our hair. Maybe it's our cookiness. Maybe it's our nowhere towns, our nothing places and our cellophane sounds. Maybe it's our looseness, but we're trash, you and me. We're litter on the breeze. We're the lovers on the street. And that kind of dichotomy of we're litter on the street and lovers on the breeze, that's perfect Suede. So we're litter and we're the lovers. That's the kind of perfect illustration in one little couple of Suedes, both sides, the beauty and then the gutter, at the same time. And it's just a perfect intro to the new Suede, if you will, which is kind of ridiculous to say when they've only been going for a few years, but Suede Mark II, it's the perfect intro for Trash.
Absolutely. And they're back. Look, glam has always had that trash aesthetic. And I think this is like a cheeky sort of throwback to the mid-70s sonically with Bowie and Mick Ronson and that sound. It's a celebration of being an outsider, part of the Suede clan and generally not fitting in. And there's a few of those Britpop, like Pulp, their whole sort of template is not fitting in. So I think that's why I really like Suede and I gravitate more to them than Oasis because their palette is much wider.
Yeah.
When they've got the paintbrush and they're painting a picture, it's not so narrow. It's widescreen, and this is just a widescreen opener.
It's amazing that you mentioned Pulp, because what was the opening on Different Class? Misshapes, which is exactly their version of this kind of thing.
I was remembering we were talking about that. So, very much a champion of the underclass, the working class, the outsiders, and you're going to hear a lot more of this as we go deeper into the album. There's a bit of a theme. It's got an amphetic quality to it, and I think it's the glammiest. I mean, his vocal line, it's so slinky, and he's a sexy vocalist. He really he puts it on. So
Brett,
he's a star. He's a star.
You don't even need to be bi-curious to acknowledge that everybody in the world seemed to fancy Brett Anderson in the early 90s to mid-90s. He just had this, it wasn't even androgyny, it was just this, it oozed sexuality. He wasn't trying, he just had it. He didn't need to affect it like David Bowie. It just came off him.
And he's aged remarkably well. I've just been watching a couple of interviews ahead of this show, and he's turned into this Brian Ferry, very debonair sort of statesman. And he's aged really well. All right. So we go into number 2, Film Star. This was the 5th single of the album. 5 singles. That's quite remarkable.
It is. And all 5 of them got into the top 10. They were the first ever UK band to have 5 singles from the same album hit the top 10. I don't know if it's been achieved since, but they were certainly the first. I can't think there would have been, unless maybe in the download age now that, every one of your songs on an album can chart on day one ridiculously. I don't like that at all, but regardless. So Film Star, if I can locate it. Also, as you expect, this is very much the era of why sell them 1 single when we can try and sell them 2. So here's Film Star 1, and here's Film Star 2. Film Star's a bit of a strange one. Even the vocal, it's not Film Star, it's Film Star. And that's, Brett always pronounces things in that kind of oddly affected way, going right back to the Drowners, the debut single. But Film Star, it starts with that great rhythm, and that's where it came from. Brett just couldn't get couldn't get that out of his head, and he went round to Richard Oakes's flat and said, "Look, I've just got this," and Richard just started playing on top of it, a very simple kind, and they both realised it was always going to be a very simple song if they built something from that. So it had to be a very primal lyric. It couldn't be something complicated and deft. It had to be something just catchy and infectious. And sure enough, you get Film Star. So what rhymes with Film Star? Car. So I mean, it's Brett not trying to be Brett. He's not trying to be the great poet underdog. For the first time, he's kind of just, right, let's do the easiest rhymes possible. But then you get this gorgeous, won't you believe it when
it switches,
it
doesn't it?
Up.
It switches.
Yeah, it's sensational when it does that part.
Yeah.
Change your name, won't you? Films, and then it all comes crashing back down, and it's got a great crunch to it as well. When you listen with headphones, it's really heavy, which you don't really think of with this more poppy side of Suede. But Film Star's got some crunch to it, it really does.
Absolutely. And live, what I've seen, it's a killer track live. They really put a bit of crunch to it. I love this. So as you said, in the verse, it's got this really compressed vocal against this mechanical drum beat. It's kind of sexy. It's got a groove. And then it switches into this real ethereal type of echoey Brett Anderson vocal. And it's wonderful. So there's a little bit of a duality about it. But Film Star propping up the bar, driving in a car, it looks so easy. So again, a bit of a social observational lyric. Life in the spotlight ain't so flash. So and there's a little bit of this throughout this album. So Yeah.
Yeah, and a little bit of autobiography from Brett as well, because by this stage he does have a bit of an entourage, and he's feeling a little bit egotistical about the whole thing. So he kind of wants to pop fun at other people, but also himself. He's quite good at that, Brett. He always puts the target on himself before others.
Absolutely. And there's a couple of songs that very much about the entourage life and poking fun at the people or the hangers on, which we'll have a couple of songs time we'll talk about. All right. Third track is Lazy. The fourth song went to number 9. This is written by Brett Anderson. What do you think about this song, Lazy?
I think it is lazy in a wonderful way, but I do think it is rather lazy to have 2 out of 3 songs so far have the "you and me" refrain. So you've got Trash has the chorus of "we're trash, you and me," and now we've got the "we're lazy, you and me." So it's a little bit. I'm not sure that the sequencing is very kind to it, because you kind of feel like, wait a minute, didn't we just hear that? But then I kind of like it. I wonder if that's intentional, because the song's called Lazy, so they did the laziest thing possible in sequencing it. I wouldn't put it past them. Sonically, it works though, and it's got all sorts of vocoder effects on Brett's vocals on it, with the "here they come with the makeup," which it's a bit strange to get into at first. In fact, that the "here they come with the makeup on" gave its name to the book by their PR agent, Jane Savage, which is highly recommended. This is all about this era, all about the making of this album.
Nice.
And it's highly, highly, highly recommended. It's a fantastic read.
That's still in print for the viewers?
Yeah,
so get that?
It only came out last year. So, yeah,
okay,
absolutely.
Cool. I'll check that one down.
So, yeah, I mean, that literally gets the title from Lazy. But yeah, I mean, "you and me were so lazy." It does feel a bit Britpoppy when it gets to the choruses. As much as Brett kind of shies away from Britpop, there are moments in this where I just think he has to let it in, because I'm trying to make pop music, and their mission statement here was they wanted to make an album that sounded like a greatest hits, even though it was all new music. Ed Buller wanted to make The Slider. That was his mission statement. The producer, he said he wanted to do The Slider, just an album that sounds like it's all your greatest hits in one, everything you can do. And the band said, well, we're not sure. They wanted to make Tanks, the T-Rex album, so they wanted that. And I think you can kind of hear both of them kind of pushed against each other, the poppiness and the heaviness of Tanks, the weirdness of Tanks, which I think you can hear a lot of in Lazy. But just like those two pushing against each other, you can hear Brett's wanting to push against the sound of 96 with, unfortunately, it has to bleed in somewhere, and sometimes it does. And I think in little parts of Lazy especially, you can hear it very much a 1996 Britpop either sound, if not a Britpop sound.
Yeah. I think lyrically, it does mind the emptiness of the middle class. So Damon was covering a lot of the kitchen sink dramas, a la the Kinks, and the emptiness of middle class life and how things aren't all what they're made out to be. Pulp definitely minds that in a lot of their albums, and I think this lyrically, this song is all about the trappings of suburban living. It's sort of very empty. We're lazy, things to be done, you and me, so lazy. It's a bit of a bleak song when you think about it, and it's the times of 1996.
A realistic song, from the raves to the council estates. Literally, how you can go from the hedonism of a great Saturday. Well, we'll come to Saturday night, and then you have to trek home to the council estate, and if you're lucky, you've got a bag of chips as your companion. So it's a more realistic version. Again, you wouldn't get an old Gallagher writing that kind of lyric.
No, you wouldn't. I'm choosing my words carefully. I don't know, because we go down that path. It goes. Look. As I said, there are some bands that paint with a big canvas, some that don't. But I think the Suede definitely is about the underclass, and it's very bleak. It goes beyond the kitchen sink drama, but just these people's lives beyond partying on a Saturday night and whatnot. The hedonism. It's like kind of empty. So yeah, there's a lot of
Yeah,
social commentary on this.
yeah. Realistic though, realistic. It feels much more realistic than So Tonight I'm a Rock and Roll Star. It feels more realistic than he lives in a house,
Yeah.
very big house in the country. And, it feels like there's somebody who knows what it's like to come from a great party and then have to troop home himself on a lonely, Saturday night, Sunday morning kind of thing. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's not an empty glumness. It's like a lived in lyric.
Yeah. Yeah. The next song I really love, and the balladry, and it brings out the beautiful vocals of Brett, because he's just got wonderful tonality. By the Sea. What do you think of this song? I think it's just a wonderful track.
It's one of my favorite songs in the album. It's one of my favorite Suede songs. I've seen him do it live, and I've seen Brett do it live, not Suede. Because the first time I saw Brett, there was no Suede. It was 2007. And he played literally about 100 yards in that direction at the Queen Margaret University. It was just stunning. I've seen them on every album release since then. I've seen every 2013, 16, 19, and then I saw them this year.
Nice.
But that was the only time I'd seen Brett solo, and I thought at the time that was my only chance. He only did a couple of Suede songs. Most of it was from his solo catalogue, but he did do By the Sea. And one other song that we'll come to, and By the Sea is kind of how I love my solo Brett Anderson. When Brett has got just a piano backing him, it's one of the most gorgeous things in pop music for me. So there is more on it than that, but ostensibly it does start very much as a very simple piano piece with Neil Codlin playing that gorgeous part, and they kept pushing to play it faster. They kept asking for All Tomorrow's Parties was the reference point. And it was Neil that said, no, we need to slow it down. And give Brett a ballad and turn it into one of these that we now know that Brett's so good at. Like everything will flow from head music. And, Brett's so good at these slower ballads, and a lot of the B-sides are like that. And By the Sea, it's such a simple song. It really is, musically and lyrically, because the verse is pretty much rewritten very little for the second verse, just changing the pronouns pretty much. But it's really about the vocal. She can walk out anytime. She can walk out anytime she wants. That's fine. But it's all about the kind of transition into that. And when I start my new life, when it starts to pick up that great chorus, not to touch the ground, and then when it does that a couple of times and goes, it's by the sea, and it goes all kind of ethereal and almost dream pop. It's such a strange, in another writer's hands, in another group's hand, it could almost be gothic, but it isn't. It's dreamy and it's oddly dark romantic. And when you read the lyrics, it's very easy to read it as this couple kind of deciding to, do themselves in at the end. But
there's been a few theories on that. Yes.
It's also very easy to read it as literally just a couple saying, let's just get away from here and move by the sea, if you want to read it as that. But when it starts to sing about literally going into the sea, you think, So like a lot of Suede's ballads, there's some darkness underpinning the whole thing. But it's gorgeous. It's one of Brett's best vocals. Very unaffected as well, which I love after quite a lot of processing on the first few tracks. I love that we've just got pure balladeer Brett Anderson at the piano with Neil. You can almost imagine them doing it just, like Judy Garland, just draped over the piano kind of thing.
Yeah. No, nicely said. Look, I think it's my theory is it's a sea change song where you're shedding your clothes, relocating, sacrificing, and looking for a better future. And ultimately, it's an optimistic song. There's a better place than where we currently are, and it's by the sea. The haunting piano is just wonderful, and you've got this beautiful, delicate guitar line. I actually wrote that it's a little bit Beatlesque. Maybe, look, Beatles are everywhere around me, and sometimes I can just pick up that I reckon they could do this, and it's kind of Beatlesque. And I actually think Keane with Somewhere Only We Know actually might have cribbed the piano line of this song.
No
I actually,
sympathy.
I actually
Where
played the
have you
songs.
gone?
I actually
Yeah,
played the song straight after this, and I fair income. I love that song. I think they cribbed it.
yeah. Yeah, no, I can hear that now. You say that, yeah. Yeah, if you slow it down a little bit, absolutely,
Yeah,
yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
glad he didn't speed it up, Davey. I think it's just
Yeah.
perfect. The right. It
Can
would
you
it would have
imagine?
changed. Would have changed the whole thing. The feel of the song.
And the feel of the album, because it
Mm,
needs something slow at this point. It needs a little step down because the positioning in the album, you don't want another banger after the first three tracks. You want something that's very much, you know,
palate
get off the
cleanser.
dance floor. Yeah, get off the dance floor if you want for a couple of minutes and rest your feet and have a quick glass.
Yeah,
It doesn't need to be another banger. And understand they wanted to do All Tomorrow's Parties, but I think there's better songs for that. I'm glad Neil's now in the band with those sensibilities to say, but I'm even more glad that they didn't just say, right, you're just in the door. You don't get to dictate anything. Neil and Richard, for being young guys, and we act as if Neil's the kind of veteran who's just joined the band. He was 21. So Neil's never been in a band. He's never had a job in his life. He's just joined the band as well. And he's already able to kind of say, no, this is not the way we'll do this. We'll do it this way. And as you say, lovely parts from Richard as well, who's not trying to be Bernard Butler, which I love too. He's not trying to be the guitar hero in this. He gets some amazing moments, but he's more than content to be a textural guitar player rather than anything else.
absolutely. All these little delicate arpeggio runs on the guitars, and there's more that's coming in some of the songs, but very tasty guitar licks. All right. So we go a little bit retro to my ears with She. What do you think of this slinky song?
When we covered Pulp, we mentioned Misshapes as being the outsider's anthem to kick it off. And then we said, and there's a little bit of John Barry in the middle. And there's a little bit of John Barry in the middle in this one too, I think. She is as close as we get to Suede's Bond theme, I think. With the ridiculously over-the-top orchestration that after the music stops, it's like nobody tells the orchestra and they just keep building and building and building.
The outro, I just ramped it up. It kept going and going and going.
And even though I've heard it a million times, I think this is where it stops. And no, there's still another ramp up.
Yeah.
It's wonderful. I mean, I love the track itself. With the he's singing it with a sneer, but again, not a very Britpop like sneer. It's more a I don't know. It's a Brett Anderson snare. There's nobody else quite like it. With the she walking like a killer, when he sings it live, he spits those lyrics out. And you've got Neil doing the la la la. You've got that kind of vocal in the background, which again gives it a retro feel. To have these la la las. Ed Buller kind of facetiously said that what makes it a great pop album is all the la la la's that they decided to add. That's what makes it a pop album, not a rock album.
Yeah.
And I think I can hear it. I think I can hear what he means by that. And that, how do you turn this from a more baroque Scott Walker like thing into more of a pop thing? Well, add some la la la's. And then Brett shakes it up a little bit. But it is a great pop rock song as well. It's Brett's favourite from the album. It's his personal favourite song on the records, which I must admit, it's not mine, but that's not saying anything bad. I mean, I love the rhyming of karma and marijuana, the way he pronounces it. That's cheeky. He obviously knows it's pronounced marijuana, but he knows that he can't rhyme that, so he makes the words change to pronounce it differently to rhyme. Wonderful.
Just puts
Absolutely
it in his own speak, so he can get it. He can do whatever he wants.
It's like Spanish Bombs by the Clash when the Spanish didn't translate and they said, well, it's the Clash version of Spanish.
Yes.
Yeah.
I put this as the Femme Fatale song. It's got a bit of a 60s psychobilly feel with that delayed guitar. The I love it. And the John Barry, I just wrote John Barry, the string arrangements. And so many of those bands just love the John Barry. There must have been something going on in that Britpop era.
they would have grown up with all these TV themes and things like the Persuaders and you know, all these themes that John Barry wrote. So it wouldn't just be the Bond theme, but it would be that as well. So every bank holiday would be punctuated by John Barry's great scores and the Ipcris File and things like that. So yeah, it was just part of the culture for that generation, for John Barry in the UK.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So then we go to the Uber hit, and this is the one that really sort of caught my ears, and it's probably my favorite song of the album, unabashedly. Beautiful Ones. What do you think of this song?
Well, Peter, you got a sneak preview last week of one of my favorite props that I own in my whole collection.
Yes.
My Beautiful Ones music box.
That's just great.
Here they come. The beautiful ones, la la. You kind of need to really ramp it up to keep the melody going.
Where did you get it? Where'd you get it from?
Suede's website. They have it. So yeah,
that's nifty.
They sell them at shows as well. There's a whole series of them actually, and some really esoteric ones that you think not many people are going to buy that, like a Richard Hawley one. Some strange choices. But yeah, that's a phenomenal little bit of memorabilia. But I'll need to pull out the props for this one for sure. So here's Beautiful Ones, the single for that, and then CD2 only came in one of these sleeves, but it's got one of my favorite B-sides on it. This one has got Sam, which is just phenomenal stuff. We could do a whole different show. Sam's on this one, on just the Suede B-sides, to be honest. I mean, no other band I can think of has their probably fourth most popular album as the B-sides compilation, but it is for Suede fans, so Sci-Fi Lullabies. But Beautiful Ones is a kind of follow-up to Trash, isn't it? It's kind of the here's Trash for side two. It gives you the same kind of idea that here's what we are. Brett wrote it about the band themselves, and kind of summing them up. But then somebody said to him, well, it's about your fan base, isn't it? And how they stick with you, and they're all kind of odd, and you know, they're not like other bands' fans, you know, they're kind of strange. And he said, well, I didn't really write it about that, but yeah, now you mention it. So now it is about that, even though he wasn't writing about that at the time. He was just writing about how the band were, you know, strange and kind of beautiful, and that was their mission statement. But it's now dedicated to their own fans. I think it's one of the most overplayed songs. I've seen it live every time I've seen them, and I don't care, because it's perfect. When the audience get to hear that and get sent home with that as the encore, nobody's complaining, even if they've heard it 100 times. Everybody is just, oh, that's just perfect. And talk about your la la la's being added. Brett always does this as his wandering into the crowd song. So he will do the beautiful ones, and then hold the microphone up for the la 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 la. But that's just part of it. I mean, to start with the whole high on diesel and gasoline, psycho for drum machine, shaking their heads to the bits. Oh, it's a wonderful, wonderful track about outsiders, but it's realistic again. It's talking about sniffing glue, and it's talking about boring, dull lifestyle choices, but how they're our guys, and by default, but it's them themselves. They weren't able to afford expensive drugs. They were sniffing glue as teenagers. So again, other Britpop bands were kind of glorifying things. Suede are kind of commenting on it and saying, we're not celebrating cigarettes and alcohol. We're not doing songs about lager and how it's a wonderful scene. And we're more commenting on this was then, this is now, but we're still the beautiful ones with it. And we're odd, we're strange, but we're us, take it or leave it. And while we're all in this kind of group together, and then by default this room together as fans, we're a team. We're one. Which for a band who are very much coming off an album where they were not one, they were very much splintering. It's a real brave track as well. It's almost like Brett's trying to convince himself that Suede are going to, well, stay together, to quote one of their earlier singles, but they weren't the beautiful ones. They weren't sticking together at this point until they were. Until Richard comes in and it's seamless, until Neil comes in and it's seamless, and all of a sudden we've got Suede, and there's no stories about Suede disappearing again. And they are the beautiful ones. It's not an ironic title anymore. It's not maybe 3 years ago you could have got away with that. They are now top of the pops all over again. It's an anthem. It's a massive hit. It's probably their most famous song. Maybe Animal Nitrate for a rave crowd, but I'd say this is the more famous song to this day in terms of just casual listeners and radio play and whatnot. Because once one certain DJ started catching on to what Animal Nitrate was about, they didn't play it quite as much. But Beautiful Ones, yeah. For some reason, you can sing about being on, sniffing glue and sniffing gasoline, but you can't do Animal Nitrate. But what do you think about that one?
Yeah, look, I think that if David Bowie, I could imagine him having a smile on his face if he heard this on the radio, because it's just glamtastic. It's like a la Ziggy Stardust, Mick Ronson, 1972. It's a glorious song, and I'm just reminiscing of people pogoing on the dance floor with so much joy and exuberance. It's a real arse shaker. Really, it is.
I mean, literally shaking your bits to the hits. Yeah. It says it in there just to kind of tell you should be moving when this part's on.
Absolutely, and you're dancing to a song that has lyrics that are quite dark. Yes, it's about the exuberance of youth, and it doesn't apologize. This is what we are young. This is what we're doing. And it's socially very observational, but it doesn't mollycoddle it. It is what it is. So you're dancing, but at the same time, there's a little bit of social commentary, a little bit of darkness, and that's all prevalent all the way through this album. And that's what makes it a cut above the rest of a lot of their peers.
Yeah. And it answers the critics before they've even got a chance to criticize. Because if somebody comes along and says, well, this pop song shouldn't be referencing casual sex and sniffing glue. Well, the refrain of it is literally, well, if your baby's going crazy, that's how you made me. So it's kind of talking to the, I guess, boomer generation, if we're talking about their generation's parents, and saying, you made us this way. We're all a product of the environment and the culture that you left for us. So if your babies have gone crazy, that's how you made me. So it's brilliant. It's answering the critics before the critics have even had a chance to criticize. So you can't criticize by default. It's brilliant.
Absolutely. Okay, so the next one is Starcrazy, which was a Anderson Neil Codling number. What do you think of this one?
Again, how wonderful that Richard and Neil are co-writers on this whole album, and they're just in the door. It's just fantastic that they didn't rely on outsider songwriters or Brett trying to do it all himself or anything like that. This was a Neil piece that, again, Brett put lyrics to. And Neil's more of a pop guy, but this is the most heavy song on the album, really. I think it's fantastic. It's got some of Brett's weirdest vocals where you just think, how do you do that? How do you actually hit those? I won't even try and do it. We're taping this rather early in the morning, my time, folks. But when you're setting these, I just think, no, don't even try it, Brett. You're not going to hit the note, even though it's a record. I know he's hit the note.
Yeah,
it's ridiculous. But the actual kind of refrain of the star crazy, it's just infectious. This is to me the most obviously T-Rexy like part, where you can hear that they've been listening to Tanks rather than the Slider. It's got just a bit more heaviness about it, a bit more there's no swagger though. It's all aggression, but it's more like a passionate aggression rather than a laddish aggression. You never get the impression that even on a more heavy song like Starcrazy, that they'd ever be a danger to you, or they'd try and be. You know, they wouldn't set about you in the streets if you bumped into Suede in the alley. You know. Whereas, again, that's another kind of Britpop thing. If you met some of those bands in the street, they want you to be intimidated. That's not a Suede thing at all. So even on a track like Starcrazy, she's got nothing to say. It's like, so this is a song about a woman all of a sudden. It was, now it is. So they've turned it into a completely different anthem and a completely different type of song halfway through with completely different musical sensibilities, which is pure Neil. Once they get back together and you start to see what Neil contributes more to the band, that is very Neil. To be able to switch in the middle of a song into a different song entirely but not change the track is very Neil, very Neil.
Yeah, I like his vocals on this. He really pushes the falsetto out, and I think it's you're right. It's got a bit of aggression. He really forces it out, and this is another one that I've seen on some YouTube clips live, and that really accentuates the aggression. There's a little bit of bite, a little bit of grit in the vocals. I like that lyric, electric shock bog brush hair.
Yeah, that's, I mean, it must be the only song that references bog brushes. I can't. Again, who else was going to write that? You're right. Jarvis Cocker might have, but that's about the only one in the scene. You wouldn't have gotten that with most of your biggies. So you know, it's so bizarre. And
Gallagher's wouldn't be doing that. They wouldn't be writing.
And again, but they wouldn't even be writing those kind of songs about women like She and like Starcrazy. They wouldn't be writing that kind of song because they were so. And it's not even to criticize Oasis; it's just a different approach. They were much more insular. So women in the Oasis songs at this stage, anyway, were how they affect the Gallagher brothers. Whereas with Suede, Brett always tries to see from the woman's point of view, or understand her point of view if he can't see through her eyes literally. Sometimes he does literally sing as the female character. But there's never misogyny in a Suede song, which I absolutely love.
Absolutely. And I'll just mention it now. That's what I've always thought was a little bit short with Oasis, that they were very lyrically a little bit short at the mark. Their lyrics never matched the Sonics, whereas you've got a band like Suede. They've got a wonderful sonic palette, but the lyrics, I mean, he's such a wordsmith. It matches the material. There's a lot of grandeur about some of the most mundane topics, like going out on a Saturday night, going in a train, and maybe some groupie in an entourage that's just a little bit star crazy, poking a little bit of fun, but at the same time, there's a little bit of social commentary. Again, I love the little guitar arpeggios on this one. Really subtle, really nice guitar work, and he doesn't overplay it.
Yeah, and if you've and you have, obviously, as you said, if you ever see them live, Richard's able to really, really rock out. He's a wonderfully heavy guitar player if he wants to be, but he never felt the need to compete with being the new butler in the band. He never felt the need to do that, which, especially for a teenager joining his favourite band, that could easily have been a problem. Because he joined for the Dogman Star tour and he was able to recreate the parts perfectly. But the big problem was going to be, but can he make new music that suits Suede? Or are we scunnered? What are we going to do? And boy, can he. He gets it. He just gets it, the way to add these little lines, these arpeggios, these runs, these licks that don't take over. It doesn't become the Richard Oakes band featuring Suede at any point. But at the same time, it never becomes, I wish Bernard was about. He would make this interesting. This wouldn't be an album with Bernard. Bernard wouldn't have made this album at all.
Yeah, so well, it's because this album was so huge, then there's kind of a bit of a mythology around Bernard.
And Dogman Star for the fans was huge because that was their epic in terms of, so that was the more commercial album. Dogman Star, relatively speaking, flopped, but it still charted very high. But
critically, it's been reappraised as one of the greatest Britpop albums.
Yes,
so it's certainly aged quite well. Yeah,
I'll go along with that. Although it's not Britpop, the scene, if you like, 90s, if we want to call it British music of the 90s, it's one of the greatest albums of that period. But so is this. It's just a completely different type of 90s British album.
Absolutely.
It sounds like if you didn't have Brett Anderson, so if you didn't have She's Starcrazy, you wouldn't put that track in the middle of Dogman Star. You just wouldn't do it at all. But likewise, you wouldn't pull out one from Dogman Star and put it into Coming Up. So it's very different bands, even though it sounds sympathetic to each other. So it sounds like the same entity, but it's not the same sound being repeated. It's a wonderful transition.
Absolutely. All right. The next song I find is one of the most lyrically interesting songs. It's I'd like to get your perspective on it. Picnic by the Motorway.
It's my favorite song on the album.
Okay. There you go.
I adore Picnic by the Motorway. I think lyrically it tells the most gorgeous story, and it's one of the it's a film, really, and it's a very British film. And we've both seen these kind of British films, and indeed could be an Australian film because very similar kind of low budget filmmaking, where we're not going to compete with the big American studios, so let's do small intimate stories. And here we've got this couple who they sit and their picnics by the motorway. They can't afford holidays or anything, so they have picnics by the motorway, which they like the idea of that because Americans thought that motorway was quite a sexy. They didn't understand when they were over there. They kept hearing the word motorway and thought that it was quite an exciting thing. They didn't understand it was just another road. It's just a grey road with petrol stations every 50 miles. It's nothing.
Bleak.
So the idea of having a grey, dull, rainy picnic by the motorway as a setting for a romantic scene, and then the most exciting thing that happens all day is a car crash that you get to witness. That's a very Suede thing. And then seeing the beauty in that, not thinking of it from the people in the car crashes point of view, but seeing the beauty in it from the, hey, let's go and have a look and see what happens. And they go, oh, that's terrible, isn't it? That's a very Brett Anderson idea. And then saying, it's also kind of beautiful in the same way. You know, it's a celebration of an odd romance and an odd sensibility, and I just think it's absolutely gorgeous. I mean, there's that line about come with me because I know that there's a hole in the fence. Even notions like that, you don't get that in popular music. But growing up, whenever you were going to underage drinking or anything, that's the kind of thing you would find, wasn't it? It's like, oh, somebody's found a hole in the fence to get through to we can hide there and we'll do it. That's much more realistic than the swagger of other songs from the era,
I think it's inspired. It's one of the darkest songs, and again, it's a reflection of the emptiness of people's lives. That through a hole in the fence, they're having a picnic behind the grey, dark motorway, and there's this accident, and it's a little bit of voyeuristic. It's something that's they get a little bit of a thrill out of it. There's so much echo on Brett Anderson's voice; it's haunting. When he says such a lovely day, I turn up the outro and, it's just really haunting.
And the way he sings that, hey, such a lovely day, that's very David Bowie as well. He's definitely channeling Bowie. Yeah.
Absolutely. This was one of the first songs that Brett did with Richard Oakes in writing, I believe. So I think it's a little mini masterpiece. I think it's one of the best songs on the album. It's so clever.
I mean, it's so simple. To me, it's a companion piece to By the Sea, just like Trash as the companion piece of The Beautiful Ones. This is a companion piece to By the Sea. Same kind of sentiments, but again, it's not repeating itself. It's just a companion piece with the don't you worry. And yeah, again, the build up to the hey, such a lovely day. It's just it's terrific stuff. And so you have to sometimes read along with it, or even better, don't read along with it until you've listened to it a good few times. And then just think about the lyrics. Let yourself get immersed in the music, first of all, and let them take you away. And don't try and overanalyze it until you've gotten used to it. I think is the best way with Suede.
Yeah. So is that your approach with their albums? You let the music absorb, you absorb the music, and then you get out the lyric sheet and follow it? Or do you do an experience, just read the lyrics like first listen?
Always music, because Brett's a writer, so I want to read his words separately. He's literally a writer. He's written 2 volumes of memoirs, which are fantastic. They're 2 of the best books you'll read from anybody in music. And so his work is always worth reading. But at the same time, even on the more recent albums, they give you instrumental versions of the albums as well. So it's always worth appreciating the sonics that go into it. And Ed Buller, who I've mentioned a few times, is the ultimate Suede producer. Produced their debut, produced Autofiction last year, and most of the albums in between. And whenever they've not had Ed, that's when they've kind of struggled a little bit. So Ed's just a perfect producer for Suede, and you can hear what he's doing on this track with the vocals, and you can hear it how he's managing to turn it into a song that isn't just another By the Sea. How he's turning it into a sonically more interesting song, but it could just be another simple piano piece. Could easily just be that.
Yeah, well, he's there, George Martin. Obviously, he's the missing piece of the puzzle. So,
he's the sixth member of Suede, 7th if you still want to include Bernard, I guess, or 8th if you still want to include Justine Frischman. But yeah,
yes, she's part of the story too. Absolutely. All right, so we're coming down to the tail end. This is another great song, "Chemistry Between Us." What do you think of this one, Davey?
Yeah. Kind of a summation of some of the themes that we've touched on. That again, some people are uncomfortable even talking about these themes, but sex and drugs, but not the rock and roll. I think it's a very Brett Anderson idea. He takes the glamour away from that whole idea of the sex and drugs. So the chemistry between us is the only chemistry that we have between us as a romantic couple. Class A, Class B, i.e. hard drugs. Is that the only chemistry that we've got going? So it's such a clever idea for a lyric. So the only chemistry we have is literally chemicals. There's nothing else going on. There's no actual chemistry between us as people. The only thing keeping us together are Class A, Class B. Is that the only chemistry? And then he again does that beautiful falsetto between us and soars and more la la la's, of course, to turn it into a pop song, even though it's an impossibly dark idea about we're really together just for the hard drugs here, and we're doing absolutely nothing else but sex and drugs, and there's no romance, there's nothing else going on, but it somehow turns it into the most beautiful pop song at the same time.
I know, it's great. I'll read a direct quote from it was an interview with the Telegraph UK in 1996. He goes, "That song is about the emptiness of it all. It's like one day you wake up in this haze, lying next to some person you don't even recognize, in some altered state, not being able to remember the past year, and you think, what's going on?" So I think it's a wonderful wordplay because, as you so eloquently put, only thing between the protagonists that bonds them is drugs. And you take that away, what have we got? Who are you? Yeah.
So they literally have chemistry, drug chemistry, but not physical or sexual chemistry, just drug chemistry. That's such a genius idea. You wonder why nobody had ever used that before.
Absolutely. And that was right in the back of the e-culture, the dance culture, which was based on a lot of that sort of, how many relationships were based on that sort of chemistry. And
also if it doesn't translate, because other parts of the world won't know what Class A and Class B means. So it doesn't, but if you're in the UK or you're in the Commonwealth and you just know about these things, you're going to know what that means, for goodness sake. So class A is your really hard stuff. Your heroin's class A. And at this time, there was a whole debate about should marijuana come right down to declassification and where should E's go on the list. It was people could bring off the list in the 1990s. It was a very bizarre time where grannies would get upset about placing on the list. But it's such a true song as well, where so many relationships are built on addiction. I know people that have been caught in that trap, and unfortunately, Brett Anderson would be one of them. One of the hard truths about Brett is that by the time you saw him, in fact, literally the time you saw him head music, he was a heroin and crack addict, which he developed on the tour for this, and amazingly kicked them both within the time it took to make the next album, A New Morning. But yeah, he was a full-blown crack addict after writing all these kind of songs. He wasn't at the time, but he wrote about all this addiction and then fell into his own trap. It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Absolutely. All right. Well, the finale is Saturday Night, which was another single, hit number 6. It's another Brett Anderson, Richard Oakes composition. What do you think of this one? The finale.
So here's your Saturday Night, and here's the fan club version of Saturday Night, which features a different version. And here's CD2 of Saturday Night, and here is the indie record store exclusive 7-inch double vinyl of Saturday Night and Beautiful Ones, which double vinyl single in 1997 wasn't very common.
That'd be worth a bit of a penny.
Nobody's getting it, but it's Suede always know how to leave. Be it a live show or be it an album, they know how to close. And once you hear the end of the previous track, Between Us, is that you think that's a perfect closer. That should end there. That's brilliant. And then you hear down, 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 down. You think, okay, this is the perfect closer. Saturday Night is gorgeous, melancholy. It is a real celebration of relationships, and for a change, there isn't much of a dark side to it. There's melancholy, but not too much darkness in terms of drugs or dark sex or anything like that. It's really just and the video very much illustrates just, it's about the loneliness of a Saturday night as well, about how you can have, what you've done, and then just like we started right back at the start of the album, end up going home to your lonely council estate yourself. And hopefully you have a good Saturday night just to kind of keep you going until welcome to the working week starts all over again. You have to go around once more on the merry-go-round. But it's such a gorgeous song with the middle eight of the we'll go to freak shows and peep shows. So even there, he's throwing in peep shows, for goodness sake, as a romantic thing. We'll go to freak shows and peep shows. But it doesn't sound like he's being silly or being coy. It still sounds sincere. Suede fans are the only fans who you could say, do you want to go to a peep show, and it wouldn't come off as sleazy. Any other band would do that in an ironic way. There's no irony in that statement from Brett Anderson at all. It's and then the glory of the whatever makes her happy, whatever makes it all right. Just a gorgeous chorus. It's a warm hug at the end of the album with a little bit of sadness. It's a lovely goodbye song. It's just a terrific little end to the album. I think it's perfect. It's perfect.
Yeah, I find it one of the saddest songs on the album because to me, it's about people going out and putting a mask, whatever makes you happy on a Saturday night. But it's sort of like the underbelly is there's this sadness and there's an emptiness, and we put on a mask as we go out on a Saturday night. I find it a very sad song. And the film clip, which plays up on the public transport, and he's in a carriage. Only he can put some sort of romanticism with the public transport.
And Keely Hawes, the actress, is in it. She's become a major star in the UK since then. What did I say earlier on? She's literally going home on a Saturday night with a bag of chips. That's what she's doing in that video. She's just sitting eating a bag of chips. And we see the oddball characters, the old tramp asking for money, and the band members come and go. There's the old guy with the goldfish just sitting there randomly. And it really is a melancholy song, but not a downer. Not a downer in too much of a way. It's sad, but in a way we can all identify with. And because it's such a common sadness, it's not too down. It's not a tragedy. It's more of a commonality that we all just have this. We all have it, where you do live for that one day a week where you can go, that one day a week where you can let your hair down a little bit or do what you want.
And you have the downer. You have the downer on the Sundays when you have to go back to work.
Exactly. I used to call it the Antiques Roadshow theme tune effect, where whenever as a kid I would hear the Antiques Roadshow theme tune, it meant, it's nearly time to go to bed and go, and have to start the week again. And that's the longest time between then and the next Saturday when you can do fun stuff. Go do what they're talking about in this track. But it's such a simple song. What's she been doing? She's been walking. She's been talking. She's been drinking. What are they going to do? They're going to just go to the pub. They're just going to go for a walk. If they find it, they'll go to a peep show. But it's not a big dramatic statement. It's not a here's how I'll save your life or anything. It's really just I'll cheer you up for that couple of hours on a Saturday night, just that few hours, and that's all you can live for, really, sometimes, is that Saturday night, And then you have the literal Saturday night, Sunday morning come down, which, as illustrated by the acid jazz movement of Jamiroquai and the Brand New Heavy, for example.
That's a whole new episode. The old recovery, the whole recovery. But I just find a lot of sadness in that song. But look, very well put. All right, well, we've covered all the 10 songs. I want to throw it to you. Is this album just too damn British that it could never have made it in America? Because I find it a bit of a head scratch. The quality of this band's material, they should have been a lot bigger. I know Oasis troubled the charts very briefly in America with What's the Story, Morning Glory, and then you had Blur with Song 2, which was very much a different sort of sounding Blur. But other than that, Britpop didn't really trouble America or all the other territories. What's your theory on Suede? Do you think they were just too English for their own good?
Yes, and same with Pop. They were so happy to be that as well because they didn't know how to be anything else. So Brett Anderson, they did go to America on the very first tour, and they were on the Letterman show. And Jane goes into it in the book, just the very first chapter. They were on the David Letterman program, and Brett Anderson was asked, who do you listen to? And he was given a list of answers for that question, as in, these are the kind of choices that our audience would want to hear. So you have to say like Aerosmith, Boston, go through the 10. Pick one of those that you kind of like, And Brett Anderson just said no, and went on. And when Dave said, who do you listen to? He said, Suede, mostly, just Suede. So it didn't want to play the American game whatsoever. When they went over there, they were the headliners. And while they were there, the Cranberries had a massive hit in America with Linger. And all of a sudden the tour flipped and the Cranberries were all of a sudden the headliners and Suede were now supporting their own support act. And it kind of soured them on the whole deal. They still do play America occasionally. Last year they played there with the Manic Street Preachers, but two massive acts like that have to be packaged together to even play theatres in America, which kind of shows you that they are really just playing to the hip crowd who know, I guess, world music by their standards. But
Yeah.
There are universal themes in Brett Anderson. Yeah, he's got a very affected vocal that's not for everyone. It's very English. But so did David Bowie. So did Mark Bolan. If you can get past their vocals, there's no reason why you can't get past Brett Anderson, because these themes that he's singing about, they are not the kind of themes that American rock stars would ever write about in a million years. But they're much more universal than I think. Picnic by the Motorway, it could easily just be Picnic by the Highway, the sentiment of it. I'm sure that small town USA, there's still people that can identify with the notion of going through a small hole in a fence and getting out your face with someone on Saturday night. I'm sure they go to clubs and then come home themselves and kind of think, that was a great night, and it's kind of sad that it was so great, because now it's almost worse to have nothing to go home to. So there's themes that Brett Anderson explores that I think are universal, and I think he and they should have been much, much bigger. But I don't know why. I think it was
head scratch.
Yeah, America was so, you listen to American alternative music of the 90s when it was Alice in Chains and post-grunge and things, and you think, yeah, I guess that's why. Britpop was just so different, and the whole scene was so different. It was upbeat but melancholy at the same time. Yeah. And I think if it was just one or the other, they might have had a chance. Because some acts did get to America. What's his name? Gavin Rossdale,
Bush.
His band, Bush. And they were bigger in America than they ever were in the UK.
Yes.
But they started making albums that sounded American and gave up being British almost.
Yeah.
Elastica became massive in America, which, but is that the novelty of Justine Frischmann being the front lady of a rock band? Who knows?
Yeah.
I don't know. Radiohead cracked the college market and then started playing to bigger audiences.
That's a whole different topic. That's one of the exceptions. Like Kid A went to number one, which is one of the most unique, strange albums. It's a stone cold masterpiece. Went to number one. Mm-hmm. But I've got this theory that Britpop may have been too baroque for the American taste. They liked their metal, they liked their hard rock, they loved the grunge, and it was much more guitar crunchy, where a lot of the Britpop is songwriting, the classic songwriting, and it's very much very baroque, and maybe that wasn't for their taste. It didn't help that it was called London Suede. Have you got any backstory about why they were called London Suede?
Yes, and I'll do some illustration while I'm here. So you've seen my tape that's been up the Eiffel Tower. Here's my old CD that I got the next year. Here's the deluxe edition I think you've got as well. It's 2 CD and 1 DVD. If people can only get one version of this, this is the one to get. This whole series of 2 CD, 1 DVD sets are amazing. They don't just have all the music videos, but they have a complete live show, at least on the DVD, sometimes 2. All the B-sides, all the demos, phenomenal series. But to go into it, here's the London Suede's version of Coming Up, which has got a live concert on a bonus disc. And the reason they were called the London Suede is there was a singer called Suede, and that was the singer's actual name. Not a band, but a singer. And that the Drowners came out in America on Columbia as Suede. And then after that, they were issued with an injunction that says, you can't call yourself that anymore. And rather than fight it, Columbia gave in, even though it was just this tiny nightclub cabaret singer who'd done absolutely nothing to bother the charts. They could have squashed this person, no problem whatsoever, or given them a payoff and just kept the name. But Columbia had no intention. That's who was distributing Suede in America. They had no intention of backing them. That record store day is the London Suede as well. That's the live at Brixton, May 1993. So to this day, even Autofiction came out as the London Suede. To this day in America, it is still the London Suede, which is just bizarre to me.
It's a total head scratch. Just going sidetrack briefly, there's an Australian band called Rufus. And you're familiar with Rufus in America, the Chaka Khan band. I mean, that's just a major example of a fairly sizable band, and they've picked that as their name and they're still trading with it. But with the London Suede, why are they didn't just
Yeah,
push it through.
yeah, and I don't get it. I don't get it, and it's a horrible sounding name, the London Suede. So it's not even
Yes.
London Suede; it's the London. It's like the English beat. It just
Yes,
doesn't
the
roll off the
beat,
tongue.
the English beat. Yes,
It
yes.
doesn't roll off the tongue. And there's another one I'm not thinking of, but there's three big ones. Here's the 25th anniversary edition, which is completely unnecessary if you've got the 2 CD DVD set, and here's the vinyl version as well, which the hype sticker says features 5 top 10 singles pressed on 180 gram clear vinyl. So it's good when it's clear vinyl. You can see right through it.
Absolutely. And folks, there's plenty of stuff on YouTube. The Albert Hall performance, a lot of live great stuff.
There's a live show from France, 97, and it is on YouTube in its entirety. It's on Suede's own channel, so we're not encouraging bootlegging or anything. It's on their channel. They uploaded a lot during lockdown to keep their fans entertained, and they've never taken them back down. So full shows, and one of them is from 97 on the Coming Up tour. Neil Codlin looks completely bored, but that's just Neil. He just looks that way. There's loads of comments going, why is the keyboard player so bored? No, that's just Neil, so accept that. For some reason, his parts are... Whoever the cameraman was thinks that Neil is the focus of the band because they're on him more than Brett. It's a really weird film. It's really strange.
Someone got paid off. Someone got paid off.
I think Neil's been slipping him some cash. Yeah, make me the star of this one. But it's a brilliant concert, although you have to suspect Brett's on something because there's a lot of energy in the room, should we say. But all
right.
Hey, it's a rock and roll show, so yeah.
Well, Brett's rock and roll. Davey, as always, this has just been a pleasure. And I think this is a fantastic album. So before we wrap it up, where does this sit in your ranking of the Suede discography? Right up there, number 1, top 3?
It's so hard. I've got every Suede single, which amounts to about 80, because they've got CD1, CD2, and then DVD singles as well. Yeah. So sometimes I think of them as a singles band, especially in albums like this. Half the album was a hit single. So it's kind of hard for me to almost think of them as albums sometimes. Dogman Star is a more complete album, I think, in terms of what it's trying to accomplish. The debut is a masterpiece of a totally different kind. A very crunchy... If the debut is Aladdin Sane, then this is their Ziggy Stardust, I think. This is the more accessible entry point. This is where to come. Although I know that's not the order it was for Bowie, but that's kind of the vibe. And then I do love the comeback records. Autofiction's such a great rock record. It's like they made a post-punk record last year, and it's like phenomenal. I've almost got 3 joint number 1s, and it is all their first 3 albums, and then Autofiction's my number 2, which from last year. So it's like the first 3 and then the latest are my favourite Suede albums. Nice. So you can't go wrong with any of them. But yeah, they're all 10 out of 10s, but in a very different way. I wouldn't want to recommend Dogman Star to the wrong person, put it that way. Yeah. Whereas I think this is an easier recommend. I think this is a much easier recommend for most people.
Absolutely. Well, I think it's top 3. I've got a soft spot for head music, which is even a little bit more Britpop. Maybe we could cover that one day, but no, I think this is a top 3 for me. And,
yeah, I think the only thing that ruins head music is some of the arrangements are a bit overdone, which, full of strings. She's in Fashion is just... I saw Everything Will Flow in 2016, and it was done just with Richard playing quietly on an acoustic guitar, and then Brett with the audience doing it, not even with him holding the microphone, him holding it with the audience and singing it. So like an almost a cappella version of Everything Will Flow. And now when I hear the album version, I just think, no, I need that 2016 a cappella version again. So yeah, if anyone watching has a chance to see Suede live, it is like a religious experience. You will see the beautiful ones. People there will embrace you. It is a very open and diverse fan base of strange people who don't have outsiders. So you won't be standing there yourself. You'll meet people and you'll end up a massive Suede head for the rest of your life.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Davey. We will do this again. We will pick out another nugget, but this is a nugget of an album that everyone needs to check out, especially those folk in the Northern Hemisphere that may not be familiar with Suede. I'm talking about you, America, Canada, etc., etc. Please do yourself a favor and check this album out. It is a beauty.
Yeah, look under L for London.
I know. Please check out Davey on his channel. I'll put it down on the link. You also see him on the Contrarians and Sea of Tranquility and Bicycle Legs channel, heaps of other channels. Please like and subscribe to Rock Daydream Nation. And one thing's guaranteed, you'll see me and Davey. We'll do a show in not so distant future. Cheers. See ya.